Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm meadsy69. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to look at the top 5 hardest tanks to play in tier 10. Yes, this is my personal opinion on what I think are tough tanks to play for the average player. I mean, some of these are not tough for me, and some of these will not be tough for the pro player, you know, like me, because I am pro. Yeah, not that pro, but I'm going by sort of the average player, and I do try and base it. I don't always do it, but I try to at least base my reviews for the average kind of player. And when you think about it, the average player is around 48 to 50%. So I don't ever really review a tank of from a 60 to 70% player, because they can make any tank look good. I always try and base my reviews of the lower skilled players, and these kind of tanks are very difficult for the lower skilled players. And the first one I've got is the Object 263. Now, even though this is called the YOLO wagon, it's a very good tank, kind of been left recently. When it's first come into the game, this was absolutely fantastic because no one really knew how to deal with it. It was a mobile tank, a very quick tank with a very nice gun, very good DPM and very good armor. That's where it got the name from, the YOLO wagon, because you just YOLO into the enemy and they used to never be able to penetrate you. But for the average kind of player nowadays, this tank is very, very difficult because people know how to deal with it. They know how to deal with the armor, and because it's got no gun depression either, there's only certain situations that you can play this tank. Like for me, this battle I went left because there was no point me going right because of all these hills and all these rocks and stuff. It will be useless for my gun depression, so I needed to get on flat ground, and the average kind of player won't really think about that. They'll just get themselves into a sort of a TD position and they won't be able to do anything because of that gun depression. And because of people know how to deal with the armor now, they're not really going to bounce too many shots either. So I honestly believe this is a fantastic tank. It always has been a good tank. No one really plays it now, but for the average player, it is definitely one of the toughest tank destroyers to play in tier 10. And again, as I've said, this is my personal opinion. You guys out there might like the tank and you might perform well in the tank, but this is my opinion. Everyone's got a right for an opinion, and I respect anyone's opinion. So moving on, another tank destroyer in tier 10 is the FV4005. Now again, this is a very difficult tank to play. You never know how to play this tank. Do you play it like a medium? Do you play it with supporting your heavies? Or do you play it sat at the back in the corner like a tank destroyer? Now, I always play it aggressive with my team because you've got that auto loader and you can do a big amount of damage. I mean, 3 shots there into that Leopard, I've done 1,400 damage, but it's still a very difficult tank to play. It has no armor. It is as tall as my house. And because of that, you're unable to sort of hide behind buildings, hide behind rocks, because they can just shoot you. And if you do manage to hide behind a rock, you're not going to be able to shoot the enemy team, but yet they're going to be able to shoot you. Take mines, for example. If you go to the middle of mines, you're not going to be able to shoot the enemy, or you might be able to shoot the enemy, but they're going to be able to shoot you much easier because your turret is just hanging over the rock. The same as Himmelsdorf. You go to the trains, you're hiding behind the trains, but yet they can still see the top of your tank. So it's a very difficult tank to play. You have to run it with a spool liner because people will HE you, but if you play it aggressive, I mean, the aggressive tactic I think works best for me, especially when you have got your teams for support. And because of the high alpha and the auto reloader, you can really pump up that damage very, very quickly if all goes well, of course. And this game actually worked out really, really well for me because yes, I pushed aggressive, yes, I was front line, but I had my team for support. And you just see how quickly we dealt that with that Leopard 1, the highest DPM medium in tier 10, well, the highest DPM tank in tier 10 pretty much, and he just got absolutely ripped apart in what, 30 seconds. So even though it's a very nice tank and you can pump up that damage, and because it has the high alpha, if you're able to get some HE shots, you're not really realizing how much damage you're actually doing. You end the game and you're thinking, how the hell did I do that much damage? But nonetheless, it is still a fantastic tank, but for the average kind of player, I can't see them doing well in this tank at all, because they're just going to get obliterated. So this is my other TD in the list. Moving on, this is a tank that I still think is very difficult. I've just made a video on it. It should have been released. If it's not released, it might be released tomorrow. But the TVP. The TVP is a fantastic tank. Again, it's a very, very nice tank. Very situational, and it's got the autoloader. But because it has no armor, because it has no DPM, it really does struggle when you come up against these tanks. Now, we're struggling here against the T54 because at least he's got some armor, and you can see the upper plate is actually quite strong, but yet we're not bouncing anything for him. And of course, if he was to rush us, we do have support from our Yo here, but if he was to rush us with another tank, I'm on a 22-second reload. There's nothing I'm doing. And the way to play this tank is very difficult. Like, for me, I'm always just looking at what tanks I can shoot, what tanks are low hit points, and what tanks I can clear. I'm always looking around. And if there's a tank that's around about 1200 damage, I'm going to go for him. I'm going to reload, and I'm going to go for him, and I'm going to try and clear him, just like we did there with the T54. We don't really care about, I'm not a damage player, you know, I don't care about damage. Damage will naturally come when you perform how you're supposed to. So I'm not sitting there constantly thinking about damage, like, oh my god, I need to shoot this tank because I need as much damage as I can. I'm more of a team player, and I always have that sort of philosophy where you do well and you work as a team, your damage will naturally come anyway, and that's how I play. So we've now reloaded. We had to relocate to reload. While we was reloading, we might as well have relocated, which we did. Unfortunately, we have been spotted from the E100, but there's no point in me going for him. He's full hit points. What's the point in me going for him? I'm just going to lose all my hit points. I might as well go for these lower hit point tanks. Unfortunately, the E75 did die just as I got there. But then again, now I have support from my Kranwagen. I am now able to push the AMX, who is pretty much a one clip. And we get rid of him easy, but it's still a very, very difficult tank to play. The hardest, definitely the hardest medium to play in tier 10. Moving up to the heavies now, we have the E100. Now again, I absolutely love the E100. It is my go-to tank just to have a little bit of fun, but again, it's one of the most difficult tier 10s to play with because of the armor profile. It only works when you angle correctly, just like we did there with the Death Star. We angled correctly and we got ourselves a bounce, and that's what you got to do because it has so many weak points, so people can just aim at any of them. If you're angling, then that does make the weak points a lot harder, and this is what we're doing here with the Death Star. Just look at these angles that we're doing. He's not even going to shoot us because he's just seeing red right now, and we got away with it. Yes, we do have tanks behind, no problem. We're just going to go forward with our team. Yes, we are going to take a few shots here, but I'm just pushing forward with my team, so at least they're not always just going to go for me, but yet we're still going to be bouncing some shots. So we've still bounced 1,700 block damage so far, which is still pretty good, but there's just so many weak points from this tank, and the average player will find it difficult to get their angles correct, and they're just going to be penned all day long. So we've managed still to bounce 2,000 damage. I've always said this tank, I've made a video a couple of years ago, or I think it was a couple of years ago, and I called this the noob man's tank because most E100 drivers are noobs and they don't know how to play the tank. Doesn't mean they're noobs, it's more they don't know how to play the tank. And I was actually going to add the mouse here instead of the E100, but the mouse for me has less weak points than the E100 does. The E100 has that huge lower plate that's really weak, and it has the cheeks of the tank, and it's slow, same as the mouse, but the mouse at least has a little bit more hit points. It has a lot less hit points, and it has a lot less weak points. So the cheeks are a lot smaller, the lower plate is a lot smaller, and overall I just think that the E100 is probably a very good tank when you get used to it and when you know how to play it, but for an average player, it is very, very difficult to play. And that brings me now on to the Leopard 1, my favorite tank in the game. Now again, this is the highest DPM medium in the game, but it is still very hard to play, and this is why I love this tank, because it is so hard to play. people don't know how to play it. It has no armor whatsoever, but what it does have is speed, DPM, accuracy, aim time. It has all that, and it has, because of the armor profile, when you're up against these big guns, you really have to think about what you're doing. You have to look around, you have to have awareness, because you're not going to bounce anything. Unless you get very lucky, you're not going to bounce anything in this. So that makes you think, like, do I want to pop out here because there's a big tank around here? Just like here, we know that there's a few tanks here, so I'm not just going to pop out because I could get wrecked. You could be HE, it doesn't have spool liner, and you're just going to be sorry. If a 183 or a Jaegeru or anything like that decide they want to shoot you, you're going to get absolutely ripped apart. But other than that, the tank is absolutely beautiful. That's why it's my favorite tank in the game. But for a 40% player, they really will struggle in this tank. I'm not scared of Leopard 1s. When I see a Leopard 1 on the enemy team, unless it's a player I know, I just see it as free damage, because most players don't know how to play the tank. So let me know your thoughts in the description. What tanks do you struggle with? I'm Meaty. Catch you soon.